The day of my sister's wedding arrived, and it was a grand spectacle in every sense. Glittering chandeliers hung overhead, extravagant floral arrangements lined the hall, and guests dressed in their finest attire filled the room, leaving no doubt that the event spared no expense. I stood awkwardly at the edge, clutching a glass of water, trying to remain invisible amidst a sea of designer gowns and tailored suits. My parents had made it clear that I was out of place in this dazzling display of perfection. "You're lucky we even let you attend," my mother hissed earlier that day as I donned a modest dress, adding, "We didn't want you embarrassing us in front of our guests." Her words stung, yet I swallowed the hurt. Their critical nature was nothing new, but today their disdain felt more pointed. As the evening progressed, I awaited the humiliation their disapproval foretold. During the wedding toast, my father took the microphone, standing erect and confident. "Today, we celebrate our beautiful daughter, Victoria," he declared, pride seeping through his voice. "She has always made us proud, unlike—" His gaze shifted toward me, and I froze, every nerve screaming for escape. "Unlike some in this family, who bring us nothing but shame," he continued, leaving the room silenced, save for a few gasps from the audience. My cheeks burned as every gaze fixed on me. It was a public reprimand, a reminder of my supposed failures. With tears welling, I refused to break, clenching my fists and fixing my gaze far across the room as my father lauded my sister's accomplishments while hurling more veiled barbs my way. I wanted to flee, but my feet were cemented in place. Then, a voice sliced through the tension. "That's enough," it commanded. The crowd parted as Liam strode forward, his sharp black suit adding to his commanding presence. My heart raced as he stepped up, his jaw firmly set, indicating he wouldn't let this stand. "Who are you to interrupt?" my father snapped, anger coloring his face. Liam responded steadily. "I'm the man who loves your daughter," his voice edged with resolve. "And I have something important to say." The hall was eerily quiet, eyes glued to the unfolding scene. Liam took the microphone from my father's slackened grip. "You call her a disgrace," he addressed the room, his voice resonating. "But let me tell you what I see. I see someone strong and resilient, more than deserving of credit." Murmurs rippled, but he pressed on. "You belittle her, humiliate her, yet miss her true heart and kindness. Your treatment tonight is more disgraceful than anything she's done." Each of Liam's words lifted the weight of long-endured silence. My parents looked furious, my sister embarrassed, but I didn't care anymore. Unexpectedly, Liam produced a small velvet box, dropping to one knee in full view of the astonished crowd. "I love you," he said earnestly, bringing fresh tears to my eyes. "Will you marry me?" The hall erupted with gasps, cheers, and protests from my parents. Yet none of it mattered. All I saw was Liam, who defended me when no one else would. "Yes," I whispered, my voice shaking, 1,000 times yes. The rest of the night blurred as Liam's bold action changed the room's narrative, shifting attention from my parents' cruelty to the unfolding romantic gesture. Those who eyed me with pity now offered congratulations, their shallow approval empty to my ears. For the first time, I didn't seek their validation. That night marked a new beginning, beyond a love story, a testament to my worth, and a reminder that happiness wasn't linked to my parents' approval. As for them, their pleas for forgiveness came sooner than anticipated. With the ring slipped onto my finger, the crowd erupted again, some cheering, others whispering behind their hands, but my parents' silence was most pronounced. My mother's face was a mask of anger, her lips a tight white line. Meanwhile, my father's expression was one of shock and thinly veiled rage, as if publicly affronted. Liam held my hand firmly, turning to face my parents. "It's clear you don't value her," he stated, his voice cutting through the din, "but I do, and that's what counts." "Get out," my father barked, anger shaking his voice. "You've embarrassed this family enough." Unfazed, Liam chuckled. "Embarrassed? No, sir. I believe you've done that yourself." I simply gave her the respect she has always deserved. As my father stood speechless, Liam gently led me toward the exit, his grasp reassuring. We walked through the parted crowd, akin to the Red Sea, and I felt empowered beside him. Long had I been the family's invisible daughter, cast in shadows while my sister enjoyed the limelight. Yet tonight, Liam ensured the world saw me for who I truly was. Leaving the venue was such an overwhelming experience that words escaped me. Liam drove us back to his apartment, a place that seemed more like a genuine home compared to my parents' grand mansion. He handed me a glass of wine and settled beside me on the couch, his hand gently resting on mine. "Talk to me," he urged softly. "How are you feeling?" Barely able to find my voice, I admitted. "I really don't know. Part of me feels relieved, but another part can't believe they shamed me in public like that." Liam's gaze grew intense with anger. "They've been treating you poorly for way too long. Tonight was merely the final straw." His words were a comfort, yet tears rose to my eyes. "How do I move forward from this?" I questioned. "They're my parents, but how do you forgive something so hurtful?" "You don't have to," Liam responded firmly. "Forgiveness isn't something you owe them. You have every right to eliminate toxic influences from your life, even if they are family." His reassurance echoed in my mind, offering a new perspective I mulled over until we turned in for the night. For the first time, living without their relentless critique seemed conceivable, a life where I could finally be true to myself, unburdened by constant fear of judgment. The following morning, my phone buzzed with messages, mostly distant relatives providing empty apologies or misguided defenses for my parents' behavior. Yet one message stood out. It was from my sister, Victoria. "We need to talk. Meet at the cafe on 5th at noon." I hesitated, but eventually agreed. At the cafe, Victoria was already seated. Her normal confidence was overshadowed by what appeared to be guilt. "I want to begin by saying I'm sorry," she confessed, clutching her coffee cup tightly. I had no idea they would do that, or I would have intervened. Her response was met with skepticism. "Really? Because you've never taken my side before." Her face reddened. "I know, and it's something I'm not proud of. But last night was shocking, even to me. It was unjust to you." I leaned my chair back, arms crossed. Why now? Why apologize after years of allowing them to belittle me? She hesitated, casting her gaze downward. I realized that their praise means nothing if it comes at my sister's expense. Although her words surprised me, forgiveness was not immediate. "You're only doing this because Liam shamed them publicly. Without him, would you even be here?" She flinched, and I knew the truth stung. "Perhaps not," she admitted. "But does it matter? I'm here now, trying to make things right." Skeptically, I finally said, "You have a lot to prove. Apologies are easy. Actions aren't." Over the next weeks, Victoria began to back her words with action, calling out our parents when they attempted to undermine me, and she even reached out to thank Liam for standing up at the wedding. Meanwhile, my parents maintained their stubborn silence, avoiding any contact or apologies. It seemed they expected the situation to dissipate, hoping I'd return to them. But I resolved to hold my ground this time. Weeks elapsed with no word from them, a silence both predictable and deeply hurtful. While I had started recognizing that their affection came with conditions, I was no longer willing to unravel them. Throughout this turmoil, Liam was my unwavering anchor, guiding me through the storm of emotions post-wedding, reminding me I wasn't alone. Despite this support, an intrinsic desire for closure lingered, a hope for an apology or acknowledgement from those who should have loved me unconditionally. Closure came unexpectedly soon, albeit not how I'd hoped. One evening, as Liam and I settled in for dinner, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from my father. "We need to talk. Come home tomorrow at noon." The text stirred an uneasy feeling, devoid of apology. It was just a terse command. Liam, upon reading it, offered his support. "You don't have to go," he said with a gentle firmness. "You don't owe them anything." "I know," I replied, my voice shaky. "But I need to hear their side, even if it's just to affirm I'm right in stepping away." The next day, approaching my parents' house felt like entering a lion's den. The imposing mansion, unfazed by countless past humiliations and criticisms, loomed ominously as I approached. My mother, greeting me with her typically sharp tone, remarked on my lateness as I entered the living room, where my father sat rigidly, Victoria present with a nervous expression. "We wanted to discuss the events at the wedding," my father started, voice clipped. "Your behavior was unacceptable." "My behavior?" I echoed incredulously. "You humiliated me in front of everyone, yet see my behavior as the issue?" "You disgraced this family by allowing that man to speak," my mother added coldly, escalating the tension. "Accepting his proposal without even a nod to us. Do you understand what kind of image that paints? How it affects you?" I echoed, stunned. "This isn't about your perception. This is about the way you've disregarded me my whole life. I've been the ignored child, the target for your discontent, while Victoria was always celebrated." "That's not accurate," my father retorted, angry. "We've always been fair with you." I chuckled ruefully. "Fair? Is that what you call publicly shamming me at Victoria's wedding? Fairness?" To my surprise, Victoria spoke. "He's right," she admitted quietly. "What you did was wrong. You overstepped." My parents looked at her, shocked. "You're siding with her?" my mother asked, disbelief dripping from her words. "This isn't about sides," Victoria asserted, her voice growing firmer. "It's about recognizing you crossed a boundary. You owe him an apology." My father's expression darkened. "I owe him nothing," he declared with finality. "He's been a disappointment since birth." His words hit me with force, but this time I didn't crumble. Instead, I pushed back, anger making my hands shake. "Thank you for showing me my place in this family," I said, my voice unsteady yet determined. "I don't need your approval, nor your distorted version of love." I moved to the door, but Victoria called out, "Wait, I'm coming with you." Victoria's decision to leave alongside me was both surprising and validating. As we drove away, she opened up about her motivations. "I've spent my entire life trying to meet their expectations," she said, emotions thick in her voice. "No matter how much they commend me, it's never enough. Watching their treatment towards you opened my eyes. This isn't love, it's control, and I don't want any part of it." Her words left a lump in my throat, but for the first time, I didn't feel isolated in my battle for freedom from our parents' stifling grip. The following weeks were a whirlwind of transformations. Victoria moved into an apartment across from Liam and me, fostering the healing of our relationship. Her apology was sincere, leaving no room for any remaining doubts. Gradually, I began to release the resentment I'd held for so long. With Liam's unwavering support, I turned to my passions, enrolling in a design course, a tentative step towards reclaiming my purpose and identity. As I slowly rebuilt my life, my parents' attempts to regain control grew more frantic. They sent letters, messages, even tried dragging other family members into guilting me back. The tipping point came when they arrived unannounced at Liam's apartment. The confrontation that followed forced everyone to acknowledge the harsh reality of our family dynamics. One quiet Sunday, as Liam and I enjoyed a peaceful morning coffee on the balcony, an unexpected knock shattered the tranquility. I glanced at Liam with confusion. We weren't expecting anyone. But there at the door stood my parents, my father's demeanor rigid and stern, my mother's usual feigned politeness masking her intent. Behind them, 2 large suitcases suggested this wasn't a casual visit. They intended to intrude. "What are you doing here?" I asked, stepping forward, my voice tight with anger. "We need to talk," my father insisted, his tone brooking no argument. "You've been making poor choices, and we're here to remedy this." Liam stood by my side, unyielding in his support. "She doesn't need you to fix anything," he said coolly. "She's thriving without your interference." My mother scoffed, eyes narrowing at Liam. "You've turned her against us," she spat. I steadied myself with a deep breath. "If you're here to lecture or blame Liam, you can leave," I said with conviction. "We're here because we care about you," my father stated, though his tone carried more authority than affection. "You're wrongfully cutting us off." "Family?" I repeated with bitter sarcasm. "Is that what you call public shaming and relentless criticism?" "That's not my interpretation of family," You're being overly dramatic, my mother snapped. You've always been sensitive. And you've always been heartless, I retaliated. You think you can just show up and guilt-trip me into compliance? That's not happening. Liam stepped forward, his voice unwavering. You don't get to decide her life anymore, he declared. She's not a child and owes you nothing. My father's face reddened, anger brimming. You have no right to speak to me, he bellowed. Nor do you have any right to mistreat her, Liam countered. You've spent years diminishing her, and now you're shocked she's standing up for herself. I observed the frustration in my parents' eyes. They weren't accustomed to being confronted, especially not by an outsider. Yet neither Liam nor I was backing down. It's time for you to leave, I stated, my voice steady despite the torrent of emotions inside. I've made my decision, and it's unshakable. My parents left, not quietly, my mother casting one last barb about coming back when Liam leaves. Her words stung, but I remained steadfast. I won't regret choosing happiness over your acceptance, I responded, unyielding in my resolve as they drove away. For the first time, a mixture of emotions washed over me. Relief, sadness, and a sense of liberation. With my parents no longer in the picture, I could finally concentrate on the people who truly mattered. Victoria had surprisingly emerged as a steadfast ally, her support crucial as I embraced this new phase in my life. One evening, on her balcony overlooking the city, she confided in me about her own struggles. I always felt the need to be perfect, she admitted, her voice tinged with sadness. They made me believe that if I didn't meet their expectations, I wasn't worthy of their love. Her admission brought tears to my eyes. I always thought you were their favorite, I said softly. I wasn't their favorite, she replied bitterly. I was their project. And now I see the cost of it all. Our bond strengthened as we shared stories and supported each other. For the first time, I felt like I had a sister rather than a rival. The following months were transformative. I immersed myself in my design course, discovering a passion I never knew I possessed. Liam was my greatest supporter, always encouraging me to dream bigger and aim higher. One night, as we sat reviewing my latest project, he turned to me and said with a serious expression, "You've come so far. I'm so proud of you." His words brought a lump to my throat. I couldn't have done it without you, I admitted. You didn't need me, he said, smiling. You've always had this strength in you. You just needed to see it for yourself. While my life was progressing, a lingering sense of unfinished business with my parents remained. Although I had no intention of reintroducing them into my life, I felt compelled to confront the pain they had caused me one final time. Victoria insisted on accompanying me, her presence a silent promise that I wouldn't face this battle alone. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a quaint cafe far removed from the familiarity of their mansion. When my parents arrived, their expressions were unreadable, though my father's jaw was set in a way I recognized as barely concealing his anger. After sitting down, an uneasy silence stretched between us until my father finally spoke. "So, what is this about?" he asked, his tone clipped. "This is about the damage you've done," I said, my voice steady. "It's about letting you know that I'm done being the family's punching bag." My mother scoffed, leaning back in her chair. "Is that what you think? That we've been cruel to you?" "I don't just think it," I replied sharply. "I know it. You've spent my entire life making me feel like I wasn't good enough." Victoria interjected, "You humiliated her in front of hundreds of people. How is that in her best interests?" My mother's eyes flicked to Victoria, surprise evident in her expression. "You're taking her side?" she questioned. "I'm taking the side of what's right," Victoria shot back. "You've pitted us against each other for years, and I refuse to be a part of that anymore." For a moment, my parents were silent, clearly taken aback by Victoria's defiance. Then my father leaned forward, his expression softening just enough to seem genuine. "We didn't realize you felt this way," he said. "We only wanted the best for you." "That's not true," I stated, refusing to let him manipulate the conversation. "You wanted control. You wanted perfection, and when I didn't fit your mold, you decided I wasn't worth your love." My mother's lips thinned, but she didn't deny it. "You always misunderstood us," she said finally. "We pushed you because we saw potential." "You pushed me because you wanted a version of me that didn't exist," I corrected. "And in doing so, you destroyed any chance of us having a real relationship." The conversation continued, each word peeling back layers of unresolved pain. Victoria and I stood united, refusing to let them deflect or minimize their actions. By the end of the meeting, my parents were visibly shaken, their confidence eroded by the truths we had laid bare. "We're not asking for your forgiveness," I said as I stood to leave. "We're asking you to take responsibility for what you've done. If you're willing to do that, maybe one day we can rebuild something. But until then, this is goodbye." Exiting that cafe felt like shedding a weight I had carried my entire life. For the first time, I felt free, not just from their expectations, but from the fear of losing their approval. Victoria and I walked in silence for a while before she finally spoke. "That was brave," she said. "I don't think I could have done that without you." "You're stronger than you think," I responded, smiling at her. "We both are." The weeks after that meeting were transformative. Without the shadow of my parents' judgment looming over me, I immersed myself in my work and my relationships. My design course became a source of pride, and with Liam's encouragement, I began freelancing for small businesses, creating logos and branding that allowed me to showcase my creativity. Victoria, too, was finding her footing. She started therapy, something neither of us had considered while growing up in a family that viewed vulnerability as weakness. As our bond strengthened daily, she slowly began healing from the burden of perfectionism. Surprisingly, the fallout from the confrontation brought unexpected allies. Extended family members who had witnessed my parents' behavior reached out with apologies for their inaction. Although their words couldn't change the past, they reminded me that I wasn't alone. One evening, while Liam and I were on the balcony watching the sunset, he turned to me, his smile making my heart skip a beat. "You've come so far," he said proudly. "I think it's time we start building our future." I laughed, glancing at the ring on my finger. "I thought we already were," I replied. "I mean officially," he said, pulling out a second ring, a simple band with our initials engraved inside. "Let's set a date." Tears filled my eyes as I nodded yes. Announcing our wedding plans brought a flood of emotions. Even though my parents remained distant, Victoria eagerly took on the role of maid of honor, determined to make the day a celebration of love and resilience. The months leading up to the wedding were filled with excitement, nerves, and unexpected healing. Victoria dedicated herself to her role, from selecting the venue to assisting with dress fittings. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of my life I thought I'd lost. One evening, as we sorted through color palettes and floral arrangements, she hesitated before admitting, "You know, I've always envied you." I blinked, surprised. "Me? Why?" "You've always been real," she said softly. "Even when it meant standing alone, you never pretended to be someone you're not. I spent my life trying to be perfect for them, and it left me feeling empty." Her confession broke my heart. I reached for her hand. "You don't have to be perfect anymore," I said. "We're free now." As our guest list grew, the question of inviting my parents lingered. Liam, ever the voice of reason, left the decision to me. "It's your day," he said gently. "If you want them there, we'll make it work. If not, that's okay too." After days of consideration, I chose to send them an invitation, not to forgive, but to offer them a last chance to show they cared. Their acceptance or refusal would speak volumes. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received their reply, a cold RSVP confirming attendance. I wondered if they attended out of genuine remorse or to save face. Victoria, optimistic as usual, saw a silver lining. "Maybe this is their way of trying," she suggested. "Even if it's not perfect, it's a step." I nodded, but my heart remained guarded, the wounds still fresh. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the perfect backdrop for the most important day of my life. As I stood in front of the mirror, dressed like a queen, emotions washed over me. I thought about the invisible girl I once was, marveling at how far I'd come. Victoria entered, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You look amazing," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "So do you," I replied, admiring her elegant maid of honor dress. "Thank you for everything." She smiled, hugging me tightly. "You deserve this happiness," she whispered. "Don't ever forget that." The ceremony was all I dreamed, intimate, heartfelt, and filled with love. Walking down the aisle toward Liam, I felt a peace I'd never known. He stood, eyes filled with unwavering love, and I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. However, the reception brought challenges. My parents arrived late, their presence casting a shadow over the day. They kept their distance, watching as Liam and I shared our first dance, their expressions unreadable. They approached us during a quiet balcony moment, my father clearing his throat. "You look beautiful," he said softly. "Thank you," I replied neutrally. An awkward pause followed before my mother spoke. "We wanted to say we're sorry for everything." Her words caught me off guard. I searched for sincerity and saw a flicker of genuine regret. "I appreciate that," I said slowly, "but words alone aren't enough. If you want to make amends, it will take time and effort." They nodded, expression somber. "We understand," my father said. "We're willing to try if you'll let us." The evening blurred with laughter, dancing, and toasts. My parents respected my boundaries, while Victoria shone as the party's life. Liam's family embraced me, filling the void my parents had left. As the night drew to a close, Liam and I stood on the dance floor amidst friends and family, our true support system. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. "This is just the beginning," he whispered. "Our beginning." I smiled, my heart swelling with love and gratitude. "I can't wait to see where it takes us," I replied. As the music played and stars glittered above, I knew I had found my happily ever after, not just in Liam but in myself.